Results of financial avoidance are always the same. It's missed opportunities when they come up, it's misaligned spending in the business and life, and a lack of financial stability. And if you're not feeling stable, then nothing's going to work anyway because you're already at a lower vibration.
Hey guys, it's Carrie, and I am coming at you for another episode of The Exit Whisper while I am sick as a dog. But let me tell you something. It was worth it to record this episode today because Michelle Jacobik is no freaking joke, okay? She bought out her employer when she was going to leave to start her own insurance agency. She bought out her big boss, took over, grew it, and then eventually sold to her partner. It's a really cool story. She's all about maximizing profits for her business, and she really is very focused on how to make sure that business owners are protected. It makes sense because she comes from insurance. She's so focused on making sure that business owners make the money that they deserve. And that was totally inspiring to me. I am into this interview, and you will be too. Take a listen. Meet Michelle.
She just sold her company. She sat in a room full of men negotiating the biggest deal of her lifetime. Wait, she sold for how much? I can't even believe she managed to get double her valuation. Let's keep this just between us.
Welcome, Michelle, to the show. I'm so happy to have you on.
Me too. I'm super excited to be here with you, Carrie.
Okay, so one of the things that I love about your story is that you're not just an entrepreneur, you are an employee turned entrepreneur, which is something that sometimes I looked at some of my employees and I just had this deep wish for them that they would one day, take that entrepreneurial jump. But the story of how this happened for you is actually really interesting. Why don't you tell us about it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, employee turned entrepreneur. And, I was literally working in financial services at the beginning of my 20s and then really was mentored phenomenally. And I learned, I got my Series 7, had my stockbroker's license, and then I was young, right? So people weren't necessarily like throwing their money at me for investing because I was like their kids' age and their kids were still in college, right? I went to community college. And so I always had this sense though for sales, and the gentleman that I worked for in financial services, he can continue to encourage me to educate. So, get your life and health license, get your Series 7. And then I ended up going to school for 18 months for taxes. So it wasn't just like H&R Block, go on the weekend for, X number of months. It was 18 months deep dive. So I continued to develop my learning outside of a classroom, but more in that, professional development space where you go deep into a topic, but then you come out and you're like, okay, I still need somebody to show me what to do. I've got this piece of paper. So I ended up pivoting from financial services into property and casualty insurance. And it's interesting because one of the things that lit me up about the industry is the fact that I came from very humble upbringings. I never vacationed. There was no extra money for vacations and whatnot. And what I found in the financial services and in the insurance space is that if you do really well at sales, you get great vacations, right? So I ended up meeting the gentleman that owned a PNC agency on a trip in Hawaii that I had gone on. I would negotiate even in my employee role, like if I win the trip for the agency, I want to go, right? And so whether you bring me with you as the owner or I get to go because of the job that I did, that was one of the things that I negotiated. And I met a gentleman while I was in Hawaii in the pool, which is interesting because when you send an employee on a sales trip, there's always that risk, right? That we have to think about as business owners. But if things are well and things, continue to grow for that person, there's an element where they're going to stay and there's an element that they may go. In my case, I ended up deciding to leave the PNC agency that I was with and transition over to the other one that was a couple towns over with the gentleman that I met in Hawaii, and I was given a partnership. And so over 3 years, I was starting to get frustrated because it really wasn't a partnership. I was doing all the work. He had gone off and literally started opening up other businesses, a lumber yard, a hotel, a gym. Like he was leveraging his time because he had somebody in there that could manage the day to day. And I honestly got to the point where my daughter was born 10 and a half weeks early, and I was back to work on day 4 while she was in ICU for 38 days, right? So fast forward, right? Because I'm treating it as though it's my own. And we weren't staffed up yet for my maternity leave. I was just interviewing to scale up my staff so that I could take time off. And so I truly treated the business as though it was my own. Fast forward 2.5 years, my daughter was 2.5. I finally took my first vacation. And the answer to another person in the agency was, wasn't she just on maternity leave? 2.5 years later. So honestly, my leap from employee to entrepreneurship was one, I felt like I was doing all of the work and I knew that I was ready to go out on my own. It just didn't feel aligned anymore. So I positioned myself to do that, Carrie. And when I went to him and said, look, I'm going to be leaving. I'm going to give 30 days. You can bring somebody in. I'll train them. He was like, I'll just sell. He wasn't wanting to come back in at that point. He had really been out of the day to day for 3 years. So there was an opportunity for me to figure out how to make it happen. And it was one of those things like in a restaurant, on a napkin, it's like, okay, here's my price. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh, right?
Did
Like,
you,
how the hell am I
how
going
did you even, that must have not even crossed your, like, I
to, yeah,
get the whole story. I get the
yeah,
whole thing. I get the being the working mom and being questioned everywhere you go and like, when you take a vacation, I get the inequity of partnerships when you're
yeah,
doing all the work, the guys
yeah.
off guard. And then you're presented this opportunity.
Mhm.
How did you, were you excited, terrified,
It,
shocked? Like
it was a
talk.
combination of all of it, right? At first, I thought this is just honestly, I had literally just signed a lease. Like I literally had negotiated a lease. I had literally worked for 4 or 5 months to get to the point where I knew that I could make the leap and have insurance carriers to write for and financially be okay and come to terms with like what it was going to look like, right? Having to get my own insurance and all different things. And so I had so much confidence because I put the time into the planning piece. And then all of a sudden there was this opportunity. I'm like, oh, now here's something that's already built. I had been doing the payroll, had been doing the books. So I knew, even looking at the numbers, because I was involved in the financials. Okay. If I didn't have the access to the financials, it may have felt very differently, but I knew the potential for what was possible, being able to take it from where it was to where I knew we could take it. I also had another woman at the table who was a friend that I brought in to open up another branch who came to
Yeah.
support me in this conversation. And so she's kicking me under the table, like, wait a minute.
Do this.
We,
Yeah,
yeah,
because
we potentially could
from
make this happen.
zero,
Yeah.
starting from zero is so
It's
tough. And
really
so,
hard.
yeah.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
so the
And
opportunity, you got it. But did you have the capital to buy it?
well,
How did you,
hell
how
no.
did you get,
So, here's the thing, when the opportunity arises, right? What happened for us is that, we did a letter of intent. We had real estate, but we knew that we couldn't do the real estate and the deal. It was a
yeah,
7-figure deal. And
yeah,
thank God, I had bought a house at 25 and had a little bit of equity. I had cleaned up. I was a mess in my early 20s. I had cleaned up my credit and I was able to, get in with the SBA. I went to SCORE. A lot of people that are starting businesses don't really access the availability of SCORE in building their
yes,
business plan and getting things together, because you got to understand the runway, you got to know the numbers. And I knew that there were things that were running through the business that were going to go away when he went
yes,
away. And
yes,
then I knew, it was no small feat. Like, it was a $17,000 a month loan payment and we had an $11,000 a week payroll. So this was no small feat. We were declined by 5 banks, 5 in 6 months. And mostly because banks at that time, they wanted real estate. They wanted collateral, not just our personal guarantees and our houses and our next borns. They believed that if we failed, they didn't want to run an insurance agency. They'd take the real estate and they're like, buy the real estate. And I'm like, we don't want the real estate yet. Like, the real estate's a whole nother nut in terms of mortgage, right? So we were lucky enough we didn't quit. We kept going. I scraped together every bit of credit cards, my equity, not my 401k, but I did, like, I had mutual funds with Oppenheimer and Templeton that I started at like 19. And I literally just went all in on grabbing what I could. And I still came up short, because literally we were good to go once we got the approval from the bank. And 2 days before closing, the loan officer, who was like a prior SBA underwriter, that's where we won. By the time we got to the sixth bank, we found an SBA underwriter that had left the SBA and went to work for a bank. So she
So they
understood the
understood.
paperwork.
Yep.
Yes, it was a huge advantage because most banks, quite honestly, the challenge is that they don't understand the paperwork, they don't want to do the paperwork, but they know that
Right.
they need the backing of the SBA to go on a $750,000 note. And we had the owner holding paper as well. So because they were capping us. And so it was a lot of navigating and truly staying in vision, and belief that we could make it happen. And every time we got a no, it was deflating, right? You get deflated, but I knew what was possible if I didn't have to start from zero, as you just said. And so luckily we had an introduction. We had an amazing loan officer who turned it around in 6 weeks. And our biggest next hurdle was the fact that 2 days before the closing, they came back and said, oh, by the way, you need another 17 grand because there's points on the loan. You need to pay closing points. And they never disclosed that like they do with a home. You get disclosed what you're think that never was discussed. And we were like, shit, now what, right? Over
$17,000,
$17,000,
a
which seemed like
seven-figure
piddly, but
deal.
when you're putting everything on the line, $17 at that point felt huge. But we were able to pull it together and get to the closing table and make it happen. So it was literally, I had a goal of buying a business or starting a business before I turned 30, and this was 2 weeks before I turned 30 that we closed on the business. So it was a fun story. One of the things that's so interesting when you go from employee turned entrepreneur and you go all in, right, at that level, and you've got a loan payment in 30 days and payroll the next week, is we had no money left, honestly, for advertising, right, and for visibility. And the prior owner had a really, really good traction and momentum. We had billboards in town, we had radio ads, we had double truck yellow pages that were 23 grand a year. There was a lot of momentum that had happened, and we were like, do we keep the name? Do we change the name? Right? And so really, we focused on making sure we kept the name, but using the story of employees turned entrepreneurs to create more traction in the community and excitement with our own books of business that we were buying the agency and now going to be in a place of going ahead and being more involved in the community and what we wanted to see happen. And we also had 3 locations the day we closed, and a week later we closed one and put everybody into two. And that took a little pressure because she can control one and I could control one. And
Yeah.
even that, like 3 4 years later, we decided we put everybody under one roof, and I would then have full carte blanche to go out on the road and do all the commercial insurance.
Yeah, because it sounded like you were focused on making sure, especially with the weight of those loans and everything that
Yeah,
you took on to buy this business, you're going to focus on building this profitably. And I
absolutely.
absolutely, I love everything about this story. I love that you had to scrape to get that last 17. Like you think when it's like a seven-figure deal, like what's
Yes.
$17,000? And then,
Right.
but it's everything.
Yeah, you're like,
Oh,
I don't know. Yeah, at that point, you're like literally just redesigning your life to make sure that if you can't take a paycheck because the other people that work for you have to have that paycheck while you're making these payments. Like, we did all of the financial pieces and we knew we were both going to take a paycheck. We knew what we would
yes.
grow to before we started splitting profits. Like, we had all of
Yep.
those things worked out. And I think that's one of the things whether you're an employee or you're somebody that's coming out and looking to start your business, specifically if there's a partnership, you want to lay those things out in advance, right? So as we're going to get to talking about our exit, right, my exit, the reality was that I felt like whether there was a death, a disability, or a desire for one or both of us to leave at a certain point, we had worked those pieces of the puzzle out in advance in our negotiations as we were going through the process of buying the business. We didn't leave that undone. And too many people that I talk to today, when I come alongside of them, they don't have expectation planning. They don't talk about, my business partner and I were 10 years apart. I was 10 years younger. And so I thought at one point she was going to be the one that wanted to exit before me.
Yeah.
And it turned out that we said 15 years. And then when we got to the 15-year mark, her daughters had come into work for us, and it didn't feel, she wasn't ready. And yet I was, because I had always said it was going to be 15 years. I felt a calling to do something else, even though I loved the industry. And then I also went through transition myself, and I thought, okay, the universe just kept hitting me with like 2x4s, reminding me that there was something else I was supposed to do.
Oh my
But
gosh.
because
So
we
wait,
had, yeah,
I have two things here. Two things.
yeah,
One thing that I loved was that you had from this, there are actually two pieces that I love when you're just starting out with her. The first thing I loved is it sounds like, correct me if I'm wrong, you had a focus on making sure that you guys were on salary and paid first, like that you really started from like a profit first sort of mentality. And I think that's
absolutely, yeah,
something a lot of women miss this. A lot of women feel guilty about putting themselves first in terms of making sure that they earn. And I think that
yes,
it's an essential piece of your story and stories of
hmm,
so many women who end up being very successful is they are unapologetically and unafraid to talk about this and the need to be paid.
yes.
And I think
Yes,
that's
and
first.
that is the basis of the path to profits in Entrepreneur's Guide to Having It All
Exactly.
and Still Having a Life. That you've got to, whether you're investing into entrepreneurship and taking that leap and a skill set from a job into your own business, or you're buying a business, you've got to know what the lifestyle design is and what is required of you, right, to bring home. Not, and a lot of people say, well, that feels like I'm creating another job. No, actually, it's creating the stability that you need to not rock your world, your entire world, and then not go bootstrapping it so you can make decisions about, do you sell the car and buy something that's a beater? What are you willing to do to be successful in business? And know that it's not just a roadmap, you need a financial runway to get there. And if you don't know
Yes.
what you need the business to do for you and your household, it just puts strain on your marriage if you're in a partnership. It puts
Yep.
strain on you, certainly, if you're a single and you're the only one that can bring it in. And too many people don't do that initial work. They have this financial avoidance vein. And here's what I always say, the results of financial avoidance are always the same. It's missed opportunities when they come up, it's misaligned spending in the business and life, and a lack of financial stability. And if you're not feeling stable in your business or in your personal life, not sure where your next mortgage payment's coming from, not sure how you're going to make payroll, then nothing's going to work anyway because you're already at a lower vibration.
Correct. That perfectly said. Plus
Yeah.
one on all of it. I hope everyone reads the book. The second thing that you said that I loved was that you knew there was a 15-year runway of like, this is what I want to do. I think I'm going to want to do something else. And I
Yeah.
think it's so challenging for so many women to think about their exit and actually plan it. Like you think like, I'm starting this business. It's going to be great. It's going to be a lifestyle business, and not actually thinking about that next step. And I love that you and your partner articulated what you wanted from the get-go. I think
Yeah.
that's essential.
Yeah, and I think I love that you're going back there, because I think one of the things that people miss, right, even in our buy-sell agreement, we had an agreement with each other at the 3-year mark. We would actually have the business evaluated, and then we would have it evaluated every single year once the taxes were done. So it became part of, overhead of the business. Like that
Yes.
initial evaluation was probably $3,500. This is back, 20 something, 25 years ago. But then every year when the taxes were done, it was like, here's the information. And we then were able to never concern ourselves with, did we grow? I mean, obviously you can look at your P&L and you can see your profit and loss, by the way, people. You can look at your profit and loss and see whether you've done better this year or worse. But sometimes doing better means more taxes, and it doesn't mean that you kept more, right? So we always made sure that we had advisors on our team to work with us on the legal pieces, the tax pieces, the strategy pieces, to make sure that we were maximizing what we could do in the business. Now, obviously, the execution was up to us, but those conversations happened quarterly with our accountant. We had a consultant that we would share the numbers with and make sure that where were the places that we could grow the business value, so that when we're ready to exit, whether that was a death, a disability, or a choice for retirement, we knew that we had put the time and the energy in. Because I think one of the things that I've seen as I now work with entrepreneurs in growing and scaling is what you just said. They don't, when I say to them, are you growing, are you in business for cash flow, or are you growing it for cash flow and to sell? And most people stop in their tracks because they're like, God, I'm just trying to make a profit right now, right? Like I
I've never
just
thought
make
about
cash. Yeah,
Yes.
they've never thought about it. And so you start, even if they're not there yet, the point is we're putting that seed in that says, well, wait a minute, because the way you do business is different if you're doing it for cash flow and lifestyle design, and it's very different if you're doing it to scale and sell. So I think, yeah, for me, that last 3 years, I was super focused. And in insurance, there's all of these ups and downs in property and casualty insurance. So, for example, hurricanes had happened, Sandy and Gloria, and like insurance companies got washed. 9/11 happened, right? So insurance companies were now looking at flood area, like zip codes. Now, I was in Connecticut and we wrote a lot on the shoreline. Well, guess what?
Yeah.
If you go to sell your agency and a lot of your attrition in your book of business is on the shoreline, that's not a positive for somebody who's going to come in and buy your agency, right? It actually was points against you because it was harder for them to keep that business, to renew that business. So we were always very in tune with what the market was doing, the things that would increase value, and we continued to evolve and make decisions to maximize what would get us at the point of exit, what the best dollar, the best EBITDA would be. And sometimes it's not just whether you're turning a profit, it's what's the value of the business to somebody else. And honestly, Carrie, my point with that was many people, what I hear is when they're ready to exit, they want to sell the business based on the potential that the person who's going to buy it has. Well, I've looked at businesses myself, right, to consider purchasing, and people, I've had two they're like a tanning salon, for example, right? She wanted $150,000 for the business. And I look at the financials and it's a net profit of $11,000 one year and 2 years of losses. And she's like, but the potential that you
But
have.
look what it could be. But look what it could be. Like
Yeah, but
it has to be rooted in
you
reality.
don't
Yes.
sell what it could be. You sell profitability and what revenue, right? The income potential.
Realize.
So my biggest thing with entrepreneurs is to say, you can't sell the potential that someone else, they're going to not write you a check, pull out their wallet and pay you for the potential. They're going to create the potential after they've bought you. When you don't get
Right.
to sell the
Entrepreneurs are not
potential.
interested in buying a headache. They're interested
That's
in
right.
buying a plug and play, something that is secure and that they can then add value to, not to
That's
your
right.
benefit as the seller, but to theirs as the
That's
buyer.
right.
So for
Absolutely.
sure. Okay, so you get to the point where you want to sell. Were you and your partner aligned in that moment? Talk to me about the process. Talk to me about
Yeah.
all of it.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't say that we were aligned. I was feeling out of alignment for a couple of years, right? I had gone through a divorce. So when we hit that 15-year mark, I was only 2 years into, my divorce transition. So I certainly wasn't going to rock anything financially when the brunt of taking care of things, was on me. And
Yep.
so my former husband was home with the kids for the last 6 years. So I was the one paying maintenance and child support and
Yes.
alimony and so forth. So you have to look at the whole picture, right? When you're making some decisions about transition. And luckily for me, I knew it was going to be a planned transition, not an unplanned. Some people find themselves in unplanned transitions, right? But it was the first time in my life I had gotten to a point where things just, like I said, the universe was literally hitting me with two by fours. Okay. And I was like, the two by fours were seriously things that were happening that it was like, are you going to make your family a priority?
Mm.
And the time had come where I was going to decide that, but I didn't know how. And in all fairness to my amazing business partner of 17 and a half years at that point, I didn't feel like I wanted another divorce. And I felt like going to her and saying, look, I'm in a new stage. My kids need more. I need more of them. I want to work less and play more. I felt like I knew that we could. I knew that we could, but we also had a different mindset. And I just thought, is it really that I'm going to come to the table and be like, I want to work 9 to 3. I want to be at my kids' games, blah, 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 blah. And I was the one generating a lot of all of the exterior business from the business insurance perspective. So I knew that that would be a really hard conversation to have. And in all fairness, I had to step back and say, is that really what I want to do? Or is it really time? Because I had this vision for it being 15 years and I was now 2.5 years past that. What happened for me was I hired a life coach. I had never had a life coach. I had never had a personal trainer. Always had consultants, always had advisors. How am I going to grow? How am I going to make more? How am I going to excel? I never went deep with a life coach. Tons of therapy, right? But not a
Yeah,
life
of
coach.
course.
It was in that beautiful gift that I gave to myself and the questioning and the challenging that this beautiful soul, Deb Miller, did with me, her work with me, that showed me that I had a choice. It didn't have to be an and or, it could be an and, or it could be an and or, but what did I truly desire? And it was scary, but I did the work to think about what the potential would be, not having any idea what would be next, not having a plan for what would be next, but knowing that there wasn't a nothing next. Like I wasn't going to just
Right.
simply sell and retire. I would
Right.
give myself time
To figure it
to
out.
figure it out.
Yeah.
And quite honestly, like most people that I think that exit, I gave myself, people are like, what are you going to do next? What are you going to do? The people closest to me and in my inner circle professionally. And I said, oh, I'm going to take 12 weeks off. Like it felt like a lifetime. And when I hit the
I
11 week,
totally understand that. I
yeah,
totally
and I thought I'll figure it out in 12 weeks, right? I'll take a rest and I'll figure it out. And I got to the 11-week mark and I was really enjoying the pace and the space to just reflect and be. It was the first winter because I actually came out of it. I had my business partner and I had had a conversation about me staying another year, and then we came to the conclusion that it would be harder for her in that transition. She's like, I'm just going to rip off the Band-Aid. So I actually exited 6 months earlier than what I would have intended. It was going to be like an 18-month. And, obviously still involved in, for a 3-year period of time in some renewals and things. But it was the first winter where I watched the snowfall and I enjoyed it because in insurance, you don't enjoy snowfall. Okay.
right.
Your employee,
Right.
22 people can't get to work. You're trying to figure out how you're
Right.
going to get the phones, man. Claims are happening. And I thought, oh my God, the snow is so pretty. I hated the snow.
Oh, I love that. So
So
your partner ended up buying you out. Your partner
yeah,
bought you
she
out.
ended up buying me out. Yep.
Awesome. And
And we
her
were able
kids
to,
worked in the business, right? Her kids went on to
yeah.
work in the business.
Oh, they were had that at that point been with us for 15 years. So I thought the natural transition would be let's let the girls buy me out and you have a family business. And that was our initial plan. And then after sitting at, thinking we were going to shorten the timeline, she's like, look, let's just figure it out between you and I, and then I'll figure it out, with the girls down the road. So yeah, it was beautiful. And it was so weird literally to like close out my year December 31st with a toast with my staff and walk out the door and the next day have literally nothing on my calendar. I was very involved in the community, president of the chamber, 5 nonprofit boards over the prior 3 years, and I literally had nothing on my calendar. And so it's a gift and a curse when you go from everything that you've built really is where your identity lies. And I realized in that first 12 weeks that the biggest gift that I could give myself is to figure out who am I outside of what I do.
Yeah.
And so my 12 weeks turned into a year. And I had those like freak out moments. Like at the 11-week mark, people were calling me going, oh, what are you going to do? Your 12 weeks is almost up. And I'm like, I have no idea. And I'll make it 12 months. And at the 9-month mark, I started to panic. Like, I better figure it out. I only have 12 weeks left. And I started, really going deep into reflection about from an impact perspective. And I use the Course in Miracles. And one of my prayers every day was, where would you have me go? What would you have me do? And with whom? And I just asked to be led. And here I am in a completely new chapter, this reinvention chapter that is so fulfilling, the work that I'm doing. And I'm not kidding. Like when I sit around the table with insurance people, you'd think I'm still in it because I absolutely love. But what I loved was that I did the business insurance and I was an advisor to other entrepreneurs at protecting their largest investment, connecting them, bringing them resources and advising them. It was never just about being their insurance agent. So today it's a natural transition to now be in consultancy and places where I bring them together and I support them with profitability. But the first rendition of what things looked like after was thinking I was going in the divorce space. I wrote my first book 4 years ago, and it's still in the top 100 in the divorce set category on Amazon. And it's called Prosperity After Divorce: Take Charge of Your Finances and Recreate the Life You Really Want Using Lifestyle Redesign Planning. The lifestyle redesign planning is the process, both whether it's planned or unplanned transition, what I used to fix my crap when I left out at 19 and was a train wreck, and when I applied to my business, when I bought it and ran it, and the divorce transition, and the transition from, owner to exit, and what I do today. And so I feel like I never planned on writing a book ever. Like, I've had vision boards since I was 20. Nowhere did it say write a book. But when you're in that place of discovery and really trying to lean into your gifts, and you're calling on how do I use my skill to make an impact, and you're consciously creating in your life, things will show up for you. And I did not want to write a book. And I just kept getting like the nudges, like, okay, I guess I'll do it. And here we are. I'm, in this space now of supporting other people with the shame, the pain, the guilt that comes with not managing the money right. I've been there, done that. And I think that it can be better. And I think that that is part of my work. It's helping people remove the guilt and shame, get rid of the financial avoidance, and be successful in the thing that they're passionate about, and doing it from the perspective of looking at the whole picture, their vision, their flow, which is their cash flow, and then the visibility to bring it all together.
Fantastic. So I love how you flowed into what's next, and really, like, it just all seems like a very natural progression, like talking about, and it's all based, I think your entire story is based on protection. I mean, you really were, even in insurance, you're focused on protection. And then after, talking about life after divorce and having prosperity after divorce is protecting people. And then you're going into really the path to profits. It's really all about how you provide this protection. It's very, very beautiful story.
Well, I'm going to receive that. Thank you, because nobody's ever presented it to me that way. And so I will thank you for that gift, because you completely gave me chills as soon as you said that. And I think sometimes, listen, I'm like 8 years in now into like figuring out what this is, right? And I think that when people exit from what they were really great at or what they built, and then they take this transition, there is a period of time where you are not going to have it figured out. I thought, oh my God, I'm a 25-year entrepreneur. My timeline and the next thing is going to be shorter and succinct. Bull, it's not, because we have to figure out the model, who we are, who we want to serve, how we're going to serve. And quite honestly, first I started with financial coaching, and then divorced women showed up, and I thought, okay, I'm open. This is probably my calling. And then I did that work and got, I became a certified divorce financial analyst and started working with women post-divorce. But it was depleting for me. Like, it's not about a divorced woman. It's, are you ready to make a transition and be able to see what's possible to have the best life that you want to have? And part of that is protection and financial stability.
Yes. And I think because you have gone through it all, right? You've gone through the early stages of credit card mishap and all of that that you mentioned. And, and then you went through the divorce and you went through all of it. It's just, you're driven by a deep desire to serve folks and know that there's just such a better path. It's a beautiful, beautiful story. And I guess my last question for you is on partnerships, because I think it's very interesting. You picked a partner. It obviously worked very, very well, because you went through together to the end, and then you sold to her in the end. When you're looking at picking a partner for a venture, or and you really want to make sure that you're doing something that doesn't go south, because choosing the wrong partner in life or in business can totally screw your profits. What are some of the things you should look for when you're picking a partner, and what worked for you?
Yeah, I think that is such a great question, because so many partnerships, like marriages, don't work out, right? Like, you're eventually going to come out of the dating game, and you're going to be left with this person that if they don't have the same, for me, it was core values, right? Did we have the same work ethic? Did we have the same core values? Did we have a vision for what each of us would do in the business where we are enhanced? Like, I didn't want to manage the staff. I love staff and I love leading. I love leadership. I love, the possibilities of speaking into and training people to be the best version of themselves. But at the end of the day, if I had to sell insurance at my desk all day long, I would have been out of my mind. And she knew that about me. And yet I knew that she had organizational skills, relational skills, things that I knew. So we figured out what our core values were together in terms of like how we would grow a company and what we would base that on. And we had a lot of discussion. It starts with a business plan. Too many people skip the business planning step, right? Where it's asking you questions. And what we did, to be honest with you, we actually took the business plan, like the template. Now people throw it in AI and it's done, right? And I'm a fan of AI, so don't get me wrong, right? It can create your outline. But at the end of the day, I think it's really important for business partners to not even do the business plan piece together, put the time and do it separately, and then come to the table and see what did they write about marketing the business? What did they write about the customer base? What did they write about the ideal client avatar? Most people sit down and they do it together. And honestly, if you take the pieces of the business planning outline and start to answer those questions, one, you're going to see how far off you are because sometimes one person might be very good at selling somebody. Like, I know if I ever went into business with my son, for example, like, he could sell hell to Jesus, okay? He could totally talk me into seeing the potential in anything because he's so passionate. And many times what happens with partners, one may be more passionate than the other, more visionary than the other. And I think that it's important to figure out between the two of you, you've got to have skill set where you're not both, you want to know we did our personality test, right? Are you a driver? Were we both drivers, or was one of us, if you do the EOS model, is there an integrator and a visionary? Like, right? So you've got to know if you've got two of the same, then are you positionally ready to hire for the other, and how will you manage being the same? And if you're different, how will you embrace and manage being different? And I think that the business planning separately is a good key. I think that really sitting down and bringing in somebody to work with you on those pieces that you may not, it's like conflict resolution. If there's a conflict, right, how are you going to handle it? That's one thing that we could have done better. There were times where we definitely didn't agree on things, right? And we didn't necessarily, that happened like probably 15 years in, right? And I think there was a reason for those things happening, right? But they weren't big things. They were stupid little things that honestly were just like, oh, it's not worth, getting in a tizzy about it. However, I think that many partnerships should engage with a conflict resolution specialist or somebody that can teach partners how to go to each other and work out a conflict. We were really great at doing that with employees. Like, if they came to us and they were like complaining about somebody, we're like, look, this is the theme of the room here is we resolve conflicts and we bring people together to find a solution. But we didn't always offer ourselves that, right? Because we didn't have that third party that was holding that space. So I think that when you're picking the partner, there's a lot of things. There's really thinking about the death, the disability, the exit, where you are in your life. And I think that, I've done this with partnerships that I've come into to do the consulting on after they've been set up. And I give them a survey monkey separate, and I ask expectation questions, kind of like 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, 10 year. And then I come into a debriefing session with them and I say, here, let's talk about how you answered.
Here's what came out. Yeah, I love the idea of if you did the business plan separately, what would happen from that? I mean, that's really, really cool.
Good.
So, Michelle, first of all, I hope everybody buys The Path to Profits and tell us get in touch with you. I mean, I want to read it right now. It sounds amazing. What's the best way for people to get in touch with you, follow you? Where's the best?
Yeah, so my website is michellejacobik.com, and then all of my social channels from LinkedIn to Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and all the places is Michelle Jacobik. And then on Amazon, right? You could grab both of the books on Amazon. The Path to Profits. Actually, I'm super fortunate. Did receive 3 awards last year for Best Business Book of the Year from both Women in Business and also from the Business Awards. So yeah, I'm like American Business Awards. It's a worthy read. It's coming out actually. It's finally going to be coming out on Audible in the next 8 weeks. I got in the studio and recorded the audio version. Get out your highlighter and get out your journal because there's work to be done. One of the things that I love about the way the book is written is that you can certainly read through it, and when you do, you'll obviously learn. And once you learn something, you don't necessarily unlearn it. It's theory. However, when you execute and you do the exercises in each of the chapters, it will move you through a place of transition. The first section of the book is about your vision and goals, and then this middle section is flow, cash flow, going under the hood of your money, and then visibility. Like, how do you let people know that you're open for business and looking for more and build strategic partnerships? And for people that want to be curated through the process, I've been hosting for 7 years what I call InVision. It's a 3-day event where you come and I curate you through the experience. The book is the DIY version, but my invitation to entrepreneurs is to follow me. And when you see the pop up, in the next couple of months, and we announce that InVision, the dates for November are happening, my invitation is to come in and let me curate you through what this looks like and hold space for you while you're connecting with other entrepreneurs from different industries and really get out of the business to work on it and get clear about the results that you want.
So awesome. Michelle,
Yeah,
thank you so much for coming on the
thanks for
show
having
today.
me.
I hope everyone reads the book. I hope people come to Envision. You are just a treasure. So thank you so
Thank you,
much for being on the
Carrie. Thank you for such a robust conversation. I really, really loved it. Thank you.
show.